Welcome to MFP Live. I'm Donna Ladd, the co-host of this weekly program. I'm also the editor and the co-founder of the Mississippi Free Press. And here, as usual, is my co-founder at the MFP, publisher Kimberly Griffin. Hey, Kimberly. And tonight, hello. I think we're all in like a short delay. So we'll pretend it's the tech, right? But anyway, so we're really excited about this show tonight. We've kind of been talking about it all week. It's kind of at least from our perspective, it's the perfect conversation to have here during Women's History Month with a fellow Mississippian, because there's going to be some history talked about here, even if it's history that not everybody loves. So Karen Hinton, who is an author and media consultant, originally from Soso, Mississippi, although she's lived a number of places. She's the author of Penis Politics, a memoir of women, men, and power. Hello, Karen. We're so happy to have you here tonight.
Hello. I'm very happy to be here tonight.
So, why don't you get us started? Just to I'd like you to just kind of lay the set the table, if you will, about your career. It's like, how did you end up? You're going to be talking about some fairly well-known people in this program, like Andrew Cuomo or Bill de Blasio or Trent Lott, perhaps. But how did your career kind of unfold from Soso, Mississippi, and Jones County, so that you ended up kind of in these rooms with these men?
Great question. I believe my interest in politics in terms of campaigns and electing the right candidate to the office really resulted from a confidence building I obtained from playing basketball. I played basketball from 6th grade until 1 year at Ole Miss. I was a Lady Rebel for 1 year. And I think you build a certain amount of confidence when you play sports. And I just always want to encourage young girls to play a sport or take ballet or sing or do something where you can really, exercise not only your muscles, but your brain as well. And I really do believe that had a lot to do with my starting to question things, both in junior high, high school, and in college. And it led me to a place where I wanted to write about issues that impacted people. And because I grew up in Soso, Mississippi, I saw plenty of poverty. And I think I was really interested in how do we stop this? Why are people so poor in Mississippi? Why are we 50th in practically everything? I said that to my dad. In the book, I write about saying this to my dad. Daddy, we need to move. We need to move to Alabama or Florida or Georgia because they're not last in everything, and we are. We've got a bad reputation. So, I really was concerned about those issues. And that's why I think I started to involve myself with candidates who I thought were really wanting to deal with poverty.
I kind of love that, just taking it back to how you developed your confidence in the first place, like immediately. That's a wonderful answer to that question, I think, because I think as women, we get that, this idea that, especially women from Mississippi, perhaps, it's like we kind of have to overcome the lack of confidence or, be ready for a community that doesn't want us to speak out about things. So that's really fascinating to me.
Yes, I think so too, because when you play ball, and during this time, this was in the 70s, and we finally got Title IX, which put more money into women's and young girls' sports. And that became very important. And in some ways, I think Title IX did more for feminism and women's rights than Gloria Steinem did, or any of the other big names that tried to pass the ERA back in the 70s. And we never were able to do that. Hopefully, maybe one day soon we will be able to do that. And I just think that it really made an impact on my life. And look, I only played for a year at Ole Miss as a Lady Rebel because I just wasn't good enough. I wasn't tall enough. I wasn't strong enough. I wasn't, I needed another career. So that's when I got into journalism and political science. But I was leaning that way anyway. So, yeah, those things were all important to me.
So my mother played basketball, but she couldn't play basketball at Jackson State because they didn't have a girls basketball team
Right.
in the
Right.
60s. And she was good. And her sister was really good from what I understand. But
Uh-huh.
there was no, and that was not, that was the civil rights movement. It wasn't that long ago, but there was no basketball team.
Right.
But there
Right.
was a basketball team in her high schools, so it was very interesting when she talks about those times. One of the things I always like for folks to talk about is their path. We talked about it a little bit before you got on.
Mhm.
How did you end up from to Mississippi, from the University of Mississippi, to this expansive career? And then maybe you'll want to tell us a little bit about your time working with Andrew Cuomo and other politicians.
Right. I give a lot of credit to Mike Espy, and I hope he's listening. Mike ran for the seat in the 2nd Congressional District, and mainly the Mississippi Delta area. And of course, that was an area that remains very plagued by poverty and low-income families that have a really tough time making it through. Especially during these COVID years. But he had so much to do with helping develop my career because I worked for him in his campaign, and then he won and he asked me to go to Washington with him. And that's how I ended up there working on Capitol Hill. And, because he was the first African-American congressman for Mississippi since Reconstruction, a lot of attention was on him. And as a result, I met a lot of politicians that way, senators and House members. And, and so that really offered me opportunities that I would not have had otherwise. So I give him credit for some of that. And then just being around certain politicians and then also working with staff enabled me to meet people. And one thing I decided was I wanted to work for Ron Brown. He became the first Black chair of the Democratic National Committee. And he knew Mike, and Mike introduced me to him. And one day I just said, I want to go work for him, Mike. Can you help me? And he did. And that turned out to be so educational for me because I really was learning about national politics. And I had exposure to Capitol Hill and with a lot of the Democratic leadership as a result. And that really helped strengthen my abilities and also made me just more and more aware of the issues that women faced in the workplace. And I knew about issues that young girls and women faced in family life, in romance, in at the grocery store, at the bank. Experiences that I knew about because I had friends, and as well as as bad as violence and abuse. And I write about that in the book. But seeing it in the workplace, I realized how pervasive it is and was because it happens to so many women. So the stories that I tell in my book are stories that practically, I think, every woman either knows a story similar to mine or has experienced it themselves. And you two might be able to tell me a story or two on this interview. But but that I think really, uh, uh, because I went through the time I spent with Ron Brown it was over 2 years. That really put me in a position where I had some room to kind of figure out who did I want to work for. And I always loved Mario Cuomo. He gave that speech at the convention, Democratic convention in 1984. He really went after Ronald Reagan, and I loved it. And I hoped that one day he would run for president, which of course he never did. But his son ends up in the cabinet for Bill Clinton, and he becomes housing secretary. And I go to work for him, and I help him with press. I'm his press secretary for a while, and at that time, he was focusing so much on the very issues that I cared about: low income, poverty, education, teen pregnancy, some of the things that I really wanted to be involved in. So then when I took that job, I think I benefited from working for him as well, even though later on I face issues with him, but it's mostly not to do with his positions on policy and programs, and more about just his own personality and the way he treated women in the workplace.
Talk to us a little bit about that. I mean, give us an example of what you observed from Cuomo, and which I found really interesting in your book, because this is not as recent, as some of the other things that have come out, right? This was sooner. And then the story that you kind of tell that involves Trent Lott, I find that very fascinating too, because it's I find it a little bit of an example of a different kind of inappropriate aggression that women face, that isn't, just head on. But why don't talk a little bit more about that, kind of relate those stories, and then we could get into that a little bit further.
Sure. You have to remember that, or I think we should remember that it's a spectrum of, sexual harassment, flirting, invitations to go out on a date, meet up, little kisses on the cheek or kisses on the mouth, then even gender discrimination, when you don't get a job or you don't get a promotion, either because your boss or a male coworker likes you, or doesn't like you, right? And either way, you suffer the consequences. And then all the way to actual abuse and violence. And so you have to see that on the spectrum. But I think that spectrum is important from beginning to end, or from not so bad to terrible, that we have to take it all very seriously and stop it, because it is so pervasive. Every woman I've ever met, talked to, has a story she can tell. Some of them want to tell the story and some of them don't, but it's good that women talk to each other about what happened to them. They may not be public about it, but it's important to talk about it and share it so that other women can see, okay, I need to talk about my issues too, because it may help me in the workplace. It may help me in a relationship. So this spectrum is valuable, and it's important for us to take it seriously. And I think until the Me Too movement, no one was taking it seriously. So I think that we have to really focus on, and we have to value it, and not dismiss these women and blame the women, excuse me, for complaining. And a lot of times people see it as a complaint rather than a harassment. You're just complaining about XYZ. You really ought to be able to put up with it. What, are you weak? You're not strong enough. You don't really know how to do your job, and now you're blaming him. I mean, there's always all of this circle of accusations that really often discourage and frighten women to speak out. Sorry, suddenly got a choke in my mouth, in my throat.
Now, if you need to get some water, we can do. Would you like to do that?
I might just
Why don't you
grab.
do that, and then I will
Sorry.
just kind of. I'm pretty good at filling the space, you know? And so hopefully she can hear me. You know, one of the one of the things that Karen is talking about in her book that I find very interesting is this, and she's talking about it now, is the spectrum, right? It's like that women and girls, because it usually starts when you're a girl, and sometimes a very young girl, start dealing with all of these different kinds of either advances or straight out abuse or rape or sexual assault or microaggressions that are sexual in nature. So when so when I was reading this book and thinking about our conversation tonight, Karen, one of the things that I'm kind of the most interested in here is the spectrum, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I read and how it's bad in all of these different kind of ways. And I almost had like a PTSD, attack because of all of the things that I faced in my own life, just kind of one after another that we don't, and most of them, at least until we get to a certain age or position. And even then, we don't share them all, or we don't feel like we can share them all because someone's going to destroy us, even if we have evidence, even if we keep the receipts in various ways. And,
or we start wearing body cams to record everything.
Exactly. Because you just kind of know that it's going to happen. So the reason I kind of brought up the story around Trent Lott, and it's okay. I mean, we could say these things on here, is because it was an example of Cuomo, right? Had made this remark after you all met with Lott. That it was this. Some people would say, "Oh, toughen up. It's a throwaway remark." But tell people what happened there real quick.
Yeah, absolutely. So he and I had some issues around various things happening with my job, and I was upset with him, and he knew I was upset with him. So he asked me to come with him to a meeting with Senator Trent Lott and at this time he was leading the Republican Senate conference, and he was a very powerful man, and would get even more powerful as time passed. So he asked me to go to this meeting, and I think he did it. I think he did it to try to make up to me, or he did it because a fellow Mississippian would be in the room with Trent Lott. So I went, I sat down, Trent Lott sat right next to me, and they had their conversation, and I joined in when I could. And then we went back to the office, and I didn't notice anything, but Andrew Cuomo said to a group of what I call the Boy Brigade, which was just a group of white men who were part of they were his inner circle. And he said to them, "You know what? I think Trent Lott just wanted to lick Karen's thighs." And immediately it got back to me that he had said it to these male colleagues of mine, and everybody was talking about it and laughing about it. And, and I was just humiliated by that, because I don't matter. I'm not important. He's going to just dismiss my presence there because Trent Lott was attracted to me in some way. Right. I mean, I just thought it was belittling, and there had been so much that had happened between the two of us before this comment about my thighs, that it just pushed me down, so I wouldn't feel like I was taken seriously, a professional in his office. And the only reason he took me was to get Trent off the some direction that he was going in. I have no idea, but this is that spectrum I'm talking about, where some people may say, big deal. So what, just go off and do your job and don't worry about it, but it's part of a pattern, and it impacts the entire workplace, because if he's doing it, then all those guys sitting around him are going to do something similar, and feel free to do it. If he's discriminating against a woman, one example I write in the book is I brought a friend to interview for a job in his office, and she was a government relations person. She had worked on Capitol Hill for several years, very talented, really wired with Democrats, and could have been a really great director of intergovernmental affairs. She comes in for the interview, and the interview goes short. He puts me in the interview. The interview's short, finishes. I go, "Hey, what's up? Why didn't you interview her more? Are you interested?" He says, "No, I'm not going to hire her." I said, "Why not?" He says, "I don't like the way she looks. She's plain Jane to me." And I couldn't believe this was coming out of his mouth. I said, "You got to be kidding me. Why are you?" She's brilliant. She's smart. She's wired. She knows people. She will help you, not hurt you. And just because you aren't attracted to her appearance, what has that got to do with it? And he had no answer for me, like most of the time. So, but it was just this pattern, one thing after another. It never ended. And by the time I left, I was so just sick of it that I thought I would never have anything to do with him again. But I married a man who had worked for Mario Cuomo. I fell in love with him. We married, and Howard, my husband, was still in that world of Cuomo's because he had high respect for his father, and had gone to work for Andrew as a result. And so that's my only connection to Andrew after my time at HUD, which had been really just story after story I could tell, which really sets the scene, as you mentioned earlier, for penis politics, because he is the master of the art of penis politics. He knows exactly what to do, how to do it, how to humiliate, how to bully, how to degrade, and has no awareness of the importance of treating a woman with respect and as a professional. None. Now he's got another story these days, but the time I've known him, the whole time I've known him, which is around 25 years now, he's always been that way.
Well, and part of what I find interesting there, and again, PTSD, I'm thinking of other stories, right? But it's this idea that I think people really need to understand is that, yes, it is direct assault. It is grabbing. It's all of the things, a lot of which came out in Me Too, right, in recent years. But it's also that kind of stuff. And so when you were talking, and I hadn't even thought about this when I read the book, I remembered, and this happened probably about 10 years ago in Jackson, where there was a prominent Black man that I knew in Jackson, who was doing some development work and some other things, but really engaged in the community. And we had done a story about him in the Jackson Free Press when I still had the Jackson Free Press. And so we had done a story about him, and he and I happened to meet somewhere afterward because we were talking about our Best of Jackson party. And so he told me that someone he worked directly with, who was a prominent Democrat, white man in Jackson, who had been supportive of what we did in various ways, the whole thing, had said to him, had made the comment to him that he must be effing Donna Ladd in order to be in the Jackson Free Press so much. And so he and I are standing there outside at this venue, and I'm just staring at him because we both realize in that moment that we had both been victims of what you call penis politics. Just this whole, it's this degrading thing, that that in that one comment, this man who was supposed to be so supportive of, women and Black people and Jackson had just kind of, so I just think about that, because it's like, that's the kind of thing that just happens, that some men, feel like they have the right to kind of reduce everything. I think I would say to this idea of sex, or that, neither he nor I must have been very talented in what we do, that it had to be about this other thing. I mean, it was just such an insult to both of us. And I just told him, we like apologize to each other, basically. But again, this is not, and this is something that I think I want to take you back to something you said at the beginning of the book, when you were talking. I think you were getting set up to talk about the coach and your high school friends, and how one of you was sexually assaulted. And when I read you saying that, I thought about one of you was sexually assaulted. In that sentence, I immediately thought to myself, before anything else, that the person who was assaulted decades ago still cannot feel like she could speak up about it. That was my immediate reaction. This man and I didn't feel like we could speak up about it. I didn't, when I was raped in high school, and I still see the guy on Facebook, I didn't feel like I could reveal who he was. I still don't, because I think that he would find some way to destroy me. I could go on and on. I mean, men that I've worked in the same workplace with, that women later come back later and tell me that they did these bad things. Then I still don't feel like I can necessarily, because the women don't want to reveal what happened to them. So we feel helpless. So anyway, I just wanted to take you back to that a little bit and get you to talk about that whole dynamic.
I'm glad you shared that with us, because that's what I mean when I say there are so many women who have a story, or have several, or know women who do, and it's just out there. And what are we going to do about it? Andrew Cuomo just recently said that we need to focus on what matters. And he went through a round of things: poverty, education, homelessness. And he says, so we need to start focusing on what matters. Well, those things do matter, but it also matters that women aren't being treated right. And you're part of the problem. And you need to change. You need to tell other men to change, and you need to accept responsibility. Instead, he just wants to say, doesn't really matter. We need to get off that. And women need to get off that too, because I see women on social media protecting, trying to help him recover by saying, oh, Andrew, we love you. We know you're great. Please don't worry about all these crazy women out there. I mean, that is just, it doesn't make me mad. It just makes me sad more than anything, because you have to accept a woman's story. Now, if it's something that breaks a law and the woman decides to take it to court, then a judge or a jury will decide whether she's telling the truth or not. And I hope now we're entering a stage where juries and judges will believe women and not just men, because for way too long, the men have always been believed and the women just made to be the problem or the victim, and why she became a victim. It was her own fault. So that really has to stop. We have to support each other. And that's one of the things that I talk about in my book, is how important it is for women to remember their friends and stay with their friends and protect them and help them and support them. Because otherwise, this will never end.
It's so interesting because one of the things we've been talking about is there are so many layers, generational layers, because women, we have to unlearn. Is that a word, Donna? Unlearn what's appropriate, what's right, what is harassment, what is not, because of these grades from inappropriate this to assault. We only sometimes, because we were taught that it's it's kind of nice when somebody thinks you look nice, and if someone thinks you're cute and and they're inappropriate, then that gives you power, right? We've played that's created a power dynamic, and you've got some power over other women. You've got power over that man, and so that is rewarded. Even if you aren't doing anything inappropriate, that power dynamic is rewarded, and it's really it's really quite hard to train yourself to stop doing it. I mean, I have a very close relative who had a series of inappropriate relationships with his subordinates, and I had to change my language, just in the last decade about what he was doing, right? Because I wasn't even using the right language for what was happening.
Yes, exactly. And also, I do think we have to keep in mind that what is difficult for some women is not so difficult for other women. So a male colleague, a male boss or her colleagues have to be conscious and aware of the issue. And so flirting with one woman and thinking they can be flirting with another woman, I mean, I don't think we can't really get into that kind of decision making if you're a man or if you're a woman. I mean, women can also be found at fault on sexually harassing a man in the workplace. But you're in a situation where that is just not appropriate. So don't do it. There are plenty of other women out there. When you walk out the door of the office, you go to a bar, okay, that's a different situation. Even then you have to be, you can't abuse and over harass someone or trying to convince them to have a drink with you or whatever. But in the workplace, it's just not the place for that. And then when it is outside the workplace, then you still have to be conscious of, if you're a man or a woman, you have to be respectful of the other person. And I think that's a whole nother conversation, but I think that is also an issue. And domestic violence in the home has been a problem for a very, very long time, as long as men and women have been living together and married. So that is, but at least there are laws that deal with that. Sexual harassment is an area where the law is unclear and it's not strong enough. And even in New York, the district attorneys there did not file a criminal charge against the former governor, Andrew, because they said the law wasn't strong enough so that they could win the case. I mean, my argument was, I don't care if you lose the case. You need to try it, and you need to take the laws that you have, because if a governor, if the most powerful man in the state, puts his hand down the dress of a woman and cuddles her breast, that's sexual harassment to me. And so, and you say you believe the women and you say that they are credible. This is what the district attorney said. Then go file the charge. And if you lose, you lose. But at least we will have had a message sent to men in high powered positions that's not appropriate. It's borderline sexual abuse.
You know, we've talked a lot about the problems, the issues, and we are making progress, although sometimes it doesn't feel like it. See my publisher's note from last week. What do you think are some of the solutions to penis politics and bro culture and a standard of I'll leave it there.
I missed a little part of the last.
Oh, I was saying, what do you think is a solution for penis politics, bro culture? And then I was about to add something, but I said I'll leave it there and let you answer that part of the question.
Right. Yes, I've given this a lot of thought, both even before I started writing the book, because it in some ways it's very simple. You have to see women as professionals, and you must treat them with respect. And even if you don't like the work they've done, and you're the boss, then you have to inform the woman that there's something wrong and that she needs to do something differently. And so don't be scared of doing that because of sexual harassment, but do it in a way that is done with respect and is not demeaning and dismissive, which often happens in the workplace, as well as in most environments. So one thing is men need to become more conscious of treating women with respect and as professionals. And I think that if there are laws that are strong enough for a civil charge to be filed, if there are corporations that fire men when they have sexually harassed or abused a woman in their workplace, or when they lose a job, or when they don't get a promotion, or they get moved to another part of the company, all those things bosses and companies can do. But other men have to see that. And if they, because then they will know, okay, I got to get on the right path here for how I treat women and how my interactions with them are. Now, a lot of men, I don't know that a lot of men, I know some men think that this is an unfair process for them because they're being held to an unfair standard. What's wrong with telling a woman that you like the dress she's wearing, or you like the way her legs look, or whatever? What's wrong with that? Well, I'm sorry, but it is something wrong with that, and you have to change, and you have to do it differently. And I'm sorry that it upsets you, but that's just what needs to happen. And because women deserve that respect. And so, and I also think that the other thing that has to happen is women need to, when they see sexual harassment happening in the workplace, they are encouraged by human resources to let human resources know. And by letting them know that there's a woman in the office who's being sexually harassed, she doesn't want to tell anyone. And another woman goes to HR and says, really, you need to look into this. This is what's happening. That's important because that will cut it. It may cut it off and stop it. And the man may not lose his job. The woman may now feel better about going to work every day instead of facing that kind of misconduct.
It's funny. I listened to you and I mean, it's such good advice. But we all know that there are, I mean, I don't know if it's a but anyway, we all know that there are these serial harassers among us. I mean, we just know that,
Yeah.
right? And I think, perhaps Cuomo could be a good example of that, or some other people who have these habits. We've all seen them in workplaces, I think, even if we didn't at the moment know exactly what it was we were seeing, or frankly, we're like, I really hope, maybe
Mhm.
we
Mhm.
should have paid closer attention in past decades, to some of what was going on, even if we didn't feel like we could do anything about it. So these serial harassers, it feels like, it almost feels like it's a game to them, right? And I do know, and I know that they will. I've seen it. I've experienced it. They will do all kinds of things to discredit women who might be able to, to expose them. And so those, I think, those are very real problems. Now, what I
Mhm.
really like in what you said, especially, is this idea that more men need to call it out, and
Mhm.
the ones who aren't the worst, perhaps the serial harassers, who just go
Mhm.
along with it, right?
Mhm.
Who don't say anything, who feel like, because it's hard for women to call it all out, because of the
Mhm.
things that happen to us. And so, like my partner Todd, who happens to be producing the show, you know, he he will call out. This actually happened with something earlier today. I mean, he'll call something sexist that happens to me before I do,
Mhm. Oh, right.
and
Yeah.
that's a wonderful thing to
Mhm.
feel, to
Right.
have that kind of support from men,
Mhm.
um, who are willing to say, to call that out, to say, what can I do? Or do you want me to, say something, or whatever the case might be. And I think there's a lot of really good advice in that, because a lot of what we're talking about here, whether it's, these kind of serial, whatever you want to call them, serial
Mhm.
harassers or serial rapists in some cases,
Mhm.
is
Mhm.
that the culture doesn't, they can't keep allowing them to get away with it, and turning it all back on women,
Right.
who try to do something about it.
Right. Right. Well, um, we think about how this happens in the workplace, but it also happens in schools and in colleges as well. And the story that I tell in my book um, is about a young friend of mine in high school,
Mm.
and she's raped by a school official who she looked up to, and he was an authority figure. And he makes a decision to go in and into a book room and assault her, rape her, and as if that's okay and that he can get away with it. Now, you know, why did he do that? Was it just for the sex? I don't think so. I think when that happens, it's about power, control, and authority. He was an authority figure over her. He was obviously very attracted to her. Um, and he took advantage and didn't think anything about it. And my book, I explain that whole situation. Um, and when you get to the end of the book, I reveal that he was transferred from the school to another school, and he gets a 17-year-old girl pregnant, and she has his babies, twins, and and um and nothing was ever done about him. So I know that there were adults in our school who knew about his just inability to control whatever warped thinking he had about his relationships with students. But they never reported it. They just let it happen as if it's not a bad thing, as if it's no big deal. She'll get over it. She'll move on. And I hold on to that story, uh, almost dreaming about it sometimes, because she was a smart, very attractive, but very smart and very nice and always considerate of other people. She gets raped, and it changes her life. She quits school, high school, and never goes to college. And then things happen to her as a result of that you'll find in the book. And her life is very different, and in some ways ruined because of what happened to her when she's 16 years old, by this man who went ahead and did it with another girl her age in another school and got her pregnant. And Mississippi law is not strong enough on this very issue, because as I understand it, girls 16, 15, 16, if they have sex with an adult male, in most states you could be charged with rape because she's underage. But in Mississippi, that is not the case. And that, so if a young girl were to say, a school official raped me, the law, he would argue, no, it was consensual, and no, I didn't rape you. And if they believe him, then that's it. No, there's no charge. There's no way to charge him with rape, which is hard to believe. That really changed.
Well, and I could say, I'll say two things to that. One, being sexually assaulted as a teenager. Now, mine wasn't by an adult. It was by a high school, either junior or senior. But it took, I was probably drunk for most of my 20s as a result of that. Not to be, but it's just that what you're trying to deal with it, and it has all these effects on you. What was really helpful to me was when I finally, I wouldn't go public. I wouldn't write about it or anything until after my mother died, because like many women, I protected my mother from knowing that. And a lot of women do that. I don't know if people talk about that enough, but a lot of that is true. But then, it was once I was able to start writing about it and talking about it openly, it was very cathartic. It really started helping me understand that it wasn't my fault. And that's why I talk about it, is to say to women that this is not your fault. It does not, and men when it happens to you. So it happens more to women, as we know, but that, it doesn't matter what you're wearing. It doesn't matter where you were. It doesn't matter. None of it matters. If somebody forces themselves on you, it just doesn't matter. And it is not your fault. And that is very important to understand, because I think the healing can really kind of start once you accept that, and other people around you accept that. And so, and the same goes for sexual harassment and these other things that happen. I happen to have just a ton of these things that have happened in my life in various and sort of ways, and you can't blame yourself at all. You may kind of regret going to a certain place or whatever, but it can literally happen anywhere, as we kind of have learned so much from the Me Too movement too, how it's so, gosh, I knew it was bad because of my own experiences, but the things that came out, even just in the media world, about the systems of it, were just, I'm like, what, So I think my question in this somehow is to get you to talk just a little bit about women of our age, because I think you and I are probably, really close in age, and then Kimberly's not that far behind us, but we've been observing things for a long time, and we know how difficult and complex and complicated these things are. But what is our role as women of a certain age in all of this.
Right. Well, one of the things that I did in New York when I decided to speak up about Andrew Cuomo was compliment the other women who were doing the same, because they're young. They are in their 20s, most of them are in their 20s and early 30s. And they had the courage to stand up and say something, speak out. And I think younger women are learning more about the dangers of that kind of behavior and how it impacts not only themselves, but their friends. And so kudos to them, because if you do that, then more women will do it. And when I was their age, I wouldn't have done it. I didn't do it. I was too afraid of losing my job, and I would have lost my job. I'm 100% confident of that. So I didn't say anything about what happened between Andrew and me. And just to make a long story short, we were in the hotel together because of a media event, and he invited me to his office to talk about how things went that day and what we would do the next day. And I had been in hotel rooms with him before, alone and with other people, so I didn't think anything about it. But when we went in the room, he had dimmed the lights and music going. It was just strange, different. And I sat down, we had a conversation, and I decided I think I should leave because it's just getting too personal. And he embraces me way too tight and for too long. And I pull out and basically say, look, I'm going to go back to my room and go to sleep. It's late. And he pulls me back, and I can tell that he's aroused, and I get out of the room, but I don't say anything about it, only to a girlfriend who I was very close to. And I called her as soon as I got back in the room and said, I don't know what to make of this. What do you make of it? But because this was 2000 and I was in politics and I wanted to stay in politics, and I couldn't talk about that. And I just would get me into trouble, and I just didn't want to go there. So I think that is really something that we have to be conscious of and tell young women that they can speak out. And I'm sorry I didn't, but I hope you will. And I think they have much more courage and stamina to do that than I had. I see a picture of Charlotte Bennett and Lindsey Boylan, who are two of the 11 women who made sexual harassment allegations against Andrew Cuomo. And they came to my book signing in New York City in December. But because they really have what it takes, and they have a confidence to allow them to do that. And that's what I think we have to do for other young women, is to give them that confidence.
One of the things that occurred to me while you were talking about you calling your friend, several of my friends, I had this conversation with my sister that had a weird encounter some years ago. She was like, it was just strange. And it wasn't just strange. It was something else, it's you don't have the words for it. And when you have leadership and your leadership is all male and they're making decisions based on code words that we all know, like if I said, I wouldn't go work for him. You know what that means. Don't go work for him.
Right.
I've heard some things. Or, yeah, I wouldn't. You know what? I'm going to go with you. If you're walking out of the room with somebody and I suddenly run up, those are all like, and you'll sometimes hear people say, men who'll say, well, I didn't know it meant that, because they don't have the language for it. It's not necessarily their fault. And when you don't have women in leadership, there's no one there with the language that'll say, well, what did she say? Oh, she said, oh, you wouldn't go work for him. I wouldn't do that if I were you. Oh, that's red flags all over the place. I don't know where I was going with that, but I wanted to talk a little bit about just very quickly, because I thought it was so interesting, because I hadn't thought about it until I read about you. Because I'm Black, y'all may have noticed, and I code switch all the time. How often are you code switching in rooms of power as a woman from the South, as a woman from the Deep South?
I think I think I learned how to do it when I was working for all the politicians that I had issues with, because that was the only way I could survive the job. And I could either get a promotion or a pay raise, or I knew it would lead me to another job. So I think, yeah, there were times when I did, as you described, code switch, when I'm trying to ensure that what I say is what they will accept, and I hope that my message, my recommendation, will come through, because I was able to sort of talk their language and then not talk their language. And I think that I was wrong to have done that. I wish I had some guidance to not go down that road. And I wish that I'd had the confidence and the strength. Now, having said that, there were times when I would stand up for my idea, my point, especially with Andrew. And I was older then. I was, 36, 37, 38 when I was working for him. So I was older, and I had built a certain level of confidence about dealing with men because I'd been in Washington for so long. I'd been in Washington for 10 years by then. But yeah, I mean, that's something that often I think women find themselves struggling with. And I think one point I want to go back to is that, we call it sexual harassment, and it is sexual in terms of what they say and what they do, but it's rarely about sex. Sometimes it is, but it's rarely that. It
Amen.
is really just about having some control over that woman, having some power over her, and having some authority, and not just her, but other women in the workplace or in school or in college or on a sports team. I mean, think about all the athletes, women athletes who have undergone this kind of abuse and misconduct among coaches and doctors and other people in their world. So, this is something that we really do have to not only do a better job of what we do individually, but also getting some women elected to positions where they can have a lot more control over legislation to strengthen sexual harassment laws, as well as even in the courtroom and in front of juries, as well as developing programs in communities that will help get the message out about how we have to end this kind of behavior and how to do it, how to get the language right. And so I hope that is something that will happen. I know in many states, more and more women are being elected to positions of power. And I just, we could go down a list of women who've been elected and who have done really terrific things. Kathy Hochul in New York, the new governor, she's really not had didn't lose a moment of time to start working with other leaders in New York to get some things done around some problems that have really been tough for New York politicians to deal with. And so good for her, because she jumped on it immediately and didn't give a man time to criticize her. Right. So, because her opponent, Andrew Cuomo, would be that man.
That's right.
So, yeah, exactly.
Well, and I think I like your message here, Karen, of we just, in some ways, we have to be very strong. And those of us who've been doing this for a while, we have to be very strong and model that for younger women, and help do what we can do. Remind them that it's not their fault when they suffer this kind of abuse. Stand up to the bullies. So we really appreciate you. You may have lost your camera, Karen, but this was
I don't know what happened.
That's okay. That's okay.
But I wondered if you were seeing me or not.
No, I'm not seeing you, but it doesn't matter.
Okay.
But we really appreciate you coming on here and talking about this, writing this book with its provocative headline so that people will read the book. No. And so for those of you out there who have not read Karen's book yet, please pick it up. Penis Politics, a memoir of women, men, and power. So thank you so much for joining us tonight, Karen.
Well, thank you so much for having me come on to talk about this issue. And I congratulate you on talking about your own. And let's always stay in touch and see how we can help each other. And thanks again. I really appreciate it.
And we definitely will, because part of what Kimberly and I are trying to do with the Mississippi Free Press is to build a real network of people who want to see solutions to all sorts of issues, but this one is certainly one of them, and kind of what we like to call the New Women's Network of Mississippi. So we will be in touch. Otherwise, thank you to all of you for being here with us tonight. Please share this show. It has important content that a lot of people need to hear, men and women. So we challenge you to have these conversations with those people around you about, when they hear women being talked about in these ways, or just kind of disrespected in ways that are trying to belittle and discredit them. Call them out. And especially if you're a man, that's really important. Now, next week's MFP Live show on next Thursday night is Ellen Reddy. She's the executive director of the Nellie Jenkins Family Center in Holmes County. Ellen is a force of nature in Mississippi. One of her pet issues and areas of expertise are the problems with school discipline. And how it works and how it doesn't. She's participated now in 2 of our last Preventing Violence Solution Circles, along with a bunch of other people. So we would love to have you guys to join us for our next circle, which I think is on March 29th. You can go to mfp.ms/circles to sign up for that next solution circle. Please remember to give to the Mississippi Free Press, a nonprofit media organization that's doing all kinds of cause and solution type journalism that you're not seeing anywhere else. You can do that at mfp.ms/donate. And then please join me for my 3rd MFP Live writing talk, which is coming up on March 22nd. These have been going really well. If you sign up as a member for as little as $10 a month, you can come to all of these talks for free. You get recordings of all past ones, as well as interviews with Anjanou Ellis, Angie Thomas, Stuart Stevens, upcoming member events such as Randall Pinkston and some other amazing folks. Rena Evers Everett, I'm sorry, Rena, just did an amazing piece, member event with us, where she talked about her mother and father, Merle and Medgar Evers. So you could also see that show. So, join us, join this network, read the MFP, send us your story ideas. We appreciate all of you out there. Please share this program. And thank you, Kimberly, for co-hosting as always. We'll see y'all next week.